Good morning. I hope all is good from your end. Okay. The title of this video is also going to be a very interesting video. The title of this video is Why Ethnography Must Begin to Be Widely Used in Pedagogical Studies. Okay. What exactly is ethnography? I am very familiar with ethnography because I specialized in ethnography in my master's of anthropology. It was a major subject, one of my major subject, along with environmental anthropology. What exactly is ethnography? Ethnography is a combination of two Greek words, ethnos, which means folk or people, and grapho. Grapho means to write. It's a Latin Greek term. Therefore, ethnography may be defined as a detailed narrative of communities and their lifestyle with a view of long-term knowledge generation, and is also sometimes described as a detailed and structured portrait of a people. Okay, ethnography therefore seeks to provide a detailed and an accurate account of a group, community, society, or culture. Ethnography usually involves a prolonged interaction with groups of people, different communities, in a systematic way, not in an ad hoc way, and usually with a plan. The description of contemporary culture through extensive and intensive field work. It is done in a wholly natural setting and not in an artificial setting. This is therefore what is a physical physics physicist or a chemist. What a lab is, a field is a lab to water, I mean, for water, physicist or a chemist. Okay, ethnographic studies focus typically on a particular community or group and specific cultural aspects of that group. Okay, therefore, let us now provide a standard definition of ethnography. The term ethnography refers to a systematic study of different peoples and cultures. It is the study of people in naturally occurring settings of field by means of methods which capture the social meanings and ordinary activities involving the researcher participating directly in the setting, if not also the activities, in order to collect data in a systematic manner but without meaning being imposed on them externally. According to a definition provided by Hammersley and Atkinson in 2007, ethnography usually involves the ethnographer participating overtly or covertly in people's daily lives and for an extended period of time, watching what happens, listening to what is said, and asking questions through formal and informal interviews, collecting documents and artifacts, in fact, collecting whatever data is available to throw light on the issues that are the emerging focus of inquiry. Okay. Another key important and hallmark and characteristic feature of ethnography is participant observation. The participant observation method was developed in the early 20s by Bronislaw Malinowski and others. It involves observing the participant in or group of people intensively. Okay, there are of course large number of ethical issues involved. I have discussed this in my previous papers and previous videos. Okay, we have dispute of usage, etc. Dispute of usage, dispute of transmission of knowledge, etc. I have discussed this. I don't want to repeat it ad nauseum so many times. And according to Bernard and Spencer in 1996, the word ethnography has two meanings. First thing is the ethnography is a product. It is refers to the writings which stem or emanate from the particular from the ethnographic activity, and ethnography is a process. This refers to the actual participant observation and the field work being carried out. Typically, if you see nowadays, what is happening is ethnography. The duration has been shortened. Sometimes they finish in a few days or few weeks, but in the traditional way, you have had expeditions around 200 years ago to the Arctic region. These lasted 2 3 years, and similarly, earlier studies by Evans Pritchard, Emily Durkheim, and all other people, Franz Boas, it typically is spanned for around 1 or 1.5 years also. And according to a definition provided by Agar is a very important anthropologist. Ethnography is a very ambiguous term, and it represents therefore both a process and a product, which are outcome. Okay, and finally, what you have is you come up with a research report, and sometimes the research report itself is done away with. At least a detailed report is provided, but it may be also published in the form of a book. It may be targeted against a special audience or against a general or for a general audience. In the olden days, what happened is we used to have Eastern and Oriental cultures being viewed as quaint and exotic. Okay, and so what they wanted to do is they wanted to publish knowledge of this, because in those days there was no internet, there were no telephones, etc. I'm talking about 150 200 years ago. So there were very little cross cultural communication, as is still the case today, unfortunately. And they wanted to communicate knowledge of quaint and exotic people to Westerners who lapped it up quite eagerly and enthusiastically. Okay, according to the Macmillan Dictionary of Anthropology in 1986, ethnographic studies combine descriptive and analytical elements but are centered on a specific culture or society and consider theoretical or comparative generalization from the standpoint of an ethnographic example. Okay, and again, Walcott and others have also said that the intent behind the study and the technique used rather than the label itself would characterize and distinguish ethnographic study from a non-ethnographic one. Okay, this is only one distinction or a point of demarcation. And in case of an ethnography, culture needs to be studied. It need not be all aspects of the culture. Some aspects of culture, usually it is done for knowledge is generated for knowledge sake. That has been the old paradigm. Okay, but I am trying to deviate from that now. One, create a situation where you need to do something good for the service of society also, bring about social cultural change. This has manifested itself in the recent past in fields such as action anthropology. Okay, I have discussed this in a previous paper, but I don't want to repeat it again in a parrot like fashion. Okay, and the Greek neologism ethnographia was introduced by Johann Friedrich Schopperlin, and the German variant was introduced by A.F. Thilo in 1767. That is the history of the term ethnography. And again, what happened later is August Ludwig von Schlosser then introduced the term ethnography to academia, albeit this was done in a historical context. Then the term stuck, and the use had expanded over the next 2 centuries, and expeditions were launched to different parts of the world. And we may also adopt a historical method. Franz Boas and others have spoken about the historical method, not however everybody endorses historical method. Again, we have camps such as Rod Benedict, Margaret Mead, we have culture, personality school, different types of schools. But I do not prefer to, as like to succumb to the ossification of, succumb to the ossification of ideas into rigid schools of thought, mutually exclusive schools of thought. And there are majorly two schools of ethnography: the traditional, canonical, old and old-fashioned British school of ethnography, and the more contemporary Chicago school of ethnography. Okay, if you see the British school of ethnography, it refers to a prominent approach to anthropological research that was carried out originally within the United Kingdom, and this was characterized by a strong emphasis of prolonged and protracted field work, participant observation, and the study of non-Western societies, typically non-Western societies, those societies which were considered to be crude and primitive by their standards. And key people who are associated with the school are A.R. Radcliffe Brown. He carried out a study on the Andaman Islanders, and also Bronislav Malinowski. Okay, and if you see they also applied structural functionalist theories. I have spoken about structuralism and functionalism also, and please read in previous papers. Chicago School of Ethnography. The Chicago School of Ethnography was a research project that took place between 1917 and 1942 at the University of Chicago. The project was led by sociologists such as Robert E. Park and Ernest W. Burgess. How did it work? This project typically focused on ethnographic studies that were conducted closer to the place of residence of the ethnographer, not quaint or exotic locations. Okay, but mostly in an urban setting, mostly in a western setting. Okay, it focused on a face-to-face interaction in urban areas. The researchers took on the role of other to describe everyday life like a mom in the modern world. The researchers believe that urban society was a site of social change. The researchers believe that qualitative methods such as naturalistic observation were best for studying urban social phenomena. Okay, naturalistic observation also, of course, involves social science research techniques such as questionnaires, interviews, okay, observations, surveys, etc. And sometimes what happens is people are allowed to talk, and tape in video recording is also taken, but this requires consent, and the objective of the study must be laid forward, and people themselves may not be that educated. So you have to bear all these factors in mind, and you should not use information gathered from them in a way that jeopardizes or hampers their interest. Okay, it should not be used against them. Okay, these researchers which I spoke about trained a group of students who wrote a series of famous ethnographies associated with the Chicago School of Ethnography. These ethnographies are often published in the University of Chicago Sociological Series. These ethnographies portray social worlds experienced in everyday life. The Chicago School of Ethnography is a part of the Chicago School of Sociology. It is known for urban sociology. Apart from these two British and Chicago schools of ethnography, we also have business ethnography, which is a nascent and emerging field. It focuses on consumer habits and target markets. Education ethnography, it involves close observation and participation to learn about a group's culture. Medical ethnography, it is used to gain insights into healthcare. Okay. Therefore, my humble opinion is we need to find a new approach to ethnography. You need to use it for more practical pursuits. Refer to our papers on practicalism and pragmatism. However, the centrality of ethnography in anthropology cannot be discounted. Okay. For example, if you see Michael Jackson, what does he say? In 1996, in his work Things as They Are, he said, open quotes, for anthropology, ethnography remains vital not because ethnographic methods guarantee certain knowledge of others, but because ethnographic fieldwork brings us into direct dialogue with others. Okay, I have spoken so far about ethnography. What exactly is ethnology? Ethnology, on the other hand, examines, interprets, and analyzes the results of ethnography or the results gathered from study of different societies, examines the meaning and context of cultures, customs. Okay, if you again try to trace the history of ethnography again, it can be traced to the Great Northern Expedition or the Second Chatka Expedition of the 1770s, which was one of the largest exploration enterprises in human history ever, mapping most of the Arctic coast of Siberia and some part of the North American coastline. Again, in the olden days, we had people like Edward Bernard Taylor. Okay, he was a famous armchair anthropologist who wrote up a need to visit sites directly, but he never put it into practice. He was therefore a classical armchair anthropologist. We later had a veranda anthropologists. They sat in the comfort of their veranda bungalows, which are usually located in distant locations, and they called the subjects one by one to their veranda. Anthropologists were therefore called handmaidens of colonialists. Okay, and they were obsessed with quaint exotic cultures, as I told you. If you see notable figures in ethnography, we had Louis Henry Morgan, who was a pioneer in the development of ethnography as a subject systematic study within anthropology. Bronislaw Malinowski worked on the Trobriand Islanders, and his work includes Argonauts of the Western, adventurous travelers, Argonauts of the Western Pacific, crime and custom in savage society, and the sexual life of the savages in northwestern Melanesia. He is also known for his studies on the Kula ring ceremony. It's a kind of ceremony where rings are circulated in a clockwise and anti-clockwise fashion. He also studied the potlatch ceremony. Okay, I have written about all these little bit in detail. Okay, again in the 20s we had it was like early 20s were 20 to 1922 particularly was an annus mirabilis for ethnography. A.R. Radcliffe Brown studied the Andaman Islanders. Edmund Leach studied Highlanders of Burma. Therefore, anthropologists need not study only far off cultures or weird or exotic cultures. Anthropologists can be practical and pragmatic too. They can try to make society is better because the dividing lines between different cultures and societies are blurring, becoming hazier and hazier in this age of globalization. Okay, now we have discussed what ethnography is. What exactly is participant observation method? It is an intrinsic part of ethnography. According to J. Platt, the term participant observation was first coined by 1924 by E.C. Linderman and was identified as a fieldwork technique by Clyde Kluckhorn in 1940. As for this approach, the anthropologist chooses the people, their geography, and the cultural areas for his study, reviews the literature and past ethnographic work, and then begins to learn the basics of culture such as language, customs, and taboos. He slowly begins to build a rapport with them, making personal acquaintances and relationship with the spectrum of individuals, but only to the extent of it is necessary. He also observes the daily chores and rituals with due diligence while staying alert for unanticipated occurrences or seasonal events that may reveal hitherto unstudied aspects of their culture. Field notes and diaries are systematically maintained. This is very important. There's no two ways about it. Translators are often used. This is done especially because speaking in English all the time is not going to work because it may jeopardize compromises on the quantity or quality of the information obtained. Tape recorders, video recorders are used. Therefore, emic and ethic perspectives are used. Emic and ethic, again, you can have standard, diverse, typical, atypical, etc. And reconciliation between emic and ethic perspectives is done. This is also known as an ethnic perspective. Okay. Now we have spoken about ethnography. Coming to pedagogy, the second part of the video. What is pedagogy? Pedagogy is the approach to teaching. It is a study and practice of learning. It also studies how this process influences and is in turn influenced by social, political, psychological, emotional, cultural development of learners. Pedagogy, therefore, is an academic discipline and is a study of how knowledge and skills are imparted in an educational context, and it considers the interaction that take place during learning. Both the theory and practice of pedagogy vary greatly as they reflect different social, political, and cultural contexts. However, most concepts of pedagogy are user-centric still. This is again because they did not study other cultures. I don't blame them entirely. Indians also don't have scientific temperament. So what do you have to do about it? Whose mistake is it? Okay. Pedagogy therefore investigates various aspects of the teaching process and the learning process also. Pedagogy adopted by teachers shapes their actions, judgments, and teaching strategies by taking into account and consideration theories of learning, understanding. I have written about theories of learning in my papers on pedagogy. Understanding of students and their needs and the backgrounds and interests of individual students. Okay, and understanding the learning goals, the situation, environment, etc. How students imbibe knowledge from their endo, meso, and exo environment, and study of aspects such as the Socratic method. Socratic method is a teaching technique that uses a series of questions to help develop students develop critical thinking skills. I'm also written about this. We need to have out of the box thinking, lateral thinking, critical thinking skills. Okay, you need to have scientific method which still have not matured and come of age. Okay, and now there is also a field of study known as linguistic pedagogy. Linguistic pedagogy is the study of how to teach languages, both including the theories and the techniques to do so. It's a field that focuses on practical classroom applications and helps students become proficient in a new language. What does language pedagogy include? It includes a formal and informal study and assessment of teaching methods, how students learn a new language too, through technology, tasks, assignments, community learning, or curriculum designs. Okay, it also investigates the theories of pedagogical content. Okay, it studies first and second language acquisition, how students acquire proficiency in a new language, which may either be their own language or a foreign language. Curriculum design, how to effectively design curriculum to learn to help students learn a new language. Assessments, how to evaluate students' progress in learning a new language. Okay, you have concepts such as communicative language teaching, which is a method that focuses on fluency and providing students with real life situations to practice their language. Okay, and if you study the history of linguistic pedagogy, the development of language pedagogy came to three stages in the late 1800s and most of the 1900s. It was conceived in terms of method. In 1960s, the University of Michigan linguistic professor Edward Mason Anthony Jr. formulated a framework to describe them into three levels: approach, method, and technique. Okay, it has been expanded by Richards and Rogers in 1982 to include approach, design, and procedure. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, language teaching was usually conceived in terms of method. In seeking to improve teaching practices, teachers and researchers would typically try to find out which method was the most effective. However, method is an ambiguous concept in language teaching and is misused in many different ways. According to Bell, this variety in use offers a challenge for anyone wishing to enter into the analysis or deconstruction of methods. Okay. Method of teaching language are also characterized into three principal views. I'll just explain it briefly. Structural view. Okay. And as per this view, language comprises of structurally limited related elements. Okay, this is known as a structure. I have spoken about structuralism in anthropology. Functionalism. Again, language is divided into many functions, and each function has a role to play in society or furthering the goals of that language, communicative ability, etc. Interactive views. It mostly deals with social and cultural dimensions of language, how they deal with each other, interact with each other, etc. Okay, and uses of ethnography in pedagogy again can be major. Okay, by pedagogy, what I mean is language learning, language teaching, non other aspects also. I've spoken about time and space encapsulation. I've spoken about many other aspects that need to be taught properly, scientific temper, developing scientific temper, etc. And it can be used for many things. Firstly, we have a language ideology. Language ideology within anthropology, social linguistics, and cross-cultural studies include set of beliefs about language as they're used in the social world. Language ideologies are conceptualization about language, just speakers and discursive practices. Language ideologies must be tied to learning outcome because the two are undoubtedly correlated. Culture specific language learning outcomes must also be studied. Culture specific non language learning outcomes must also be studied. Language acquisition, people of elites, upper class people, the lower class people, okay, people speaking acrolex, basolex, and mesolex must be studied. Again, within India, you can have studies of language acquisition pattern of North Indians, South Indians, first language acquisition patterns, second language acquisition patterns, etc. The main theories of first language acquisition are many, but these are again Eurocentric. We have the behaviorist theory that is associated by B.F. Skinner. I've spoken about this previously. Nativist theory as proposed by Noam Chomsky. Cognitive theory that is linked to Jean Piaget. Interactionist theory championed by Jerome Brunet. Okay, and it also explains how children acquire their own native language in different contexts. Again, lot of differences and variations must be captured here. Okay, for example, we have Indians. Indians, many of them studying English. For them, their own language is becoming alien. It's a different case. And again, we have different second language acquisition patterns, second language acquisition strategies. Krashen has developed a set of five hypotheses to explain how language acquisition works. The acquisition learning hypothesis, the monitor hypothesis, the input hypothesis, the effective filter hypothesis, and the natural order hypothesis. We also have other theories such as behaviorism and innatism. Okay, and students also learn second language through five predictable stages: pre-production, early production, speech emergency, intermediate fluency, advanced fluency. However, all these things must be understood through ethnography, and all these studies must be correlated. Okay, language as well as learning outcomes as well as teaching outcomes, they must emerge as a coherent whole. Everything also must be ratified through ethnography. Language acquisition patterns must be based on socio-economic outcomes, socio-cultural groups, and the language acquisition patterns of urban people, rural people, general learning abilities of different groups of people. Large sums of data must be processed. Impact of different teaching methods on learning outcomes must be done, assessed, and evaluated. Impact of pedagogical content or learning outcomes must be assessed and evaluated. Approaches to improve learning outcomes must be assessed and evaluated. Approaches to improve economic performance must also be assessed and evaluated. And as a part of this, what we need to do is we need to study successful societies and unsuccessful societies to see the root cause analysis. We can do a root cause analysis study, how they can be improved and better. So these are some of the areas which can be used in, I mean, ethnography in pedagogy, okay, and linguistics. Unfortunately, it's very narrow. It can be expanded a great deal because of its Eurocentrism. It has remained narrow, but I think researchers from developed countries must take this forward. Thank you very much once again. Bye.